It's Esther. Welcome to Module 2, Lesson 2. This is going to be an interesting lesson because we're going to learn about the Canadian identity and who we are as a country. A lot of people tease and say Canadians have no identity, but this just isn't true. We're going to look at page 10 of the Discover Canada Guide, and we're going to see more about who the original people who were in Canada and who came to Canada to live a long time ago. We call these the founding people, and there are three groups: the Aboriginal, the British, and the French. At the top of page 10 in your guide, you will see that Canada has the oldest continuous constitutional tradition in the world. That is a mouthful, but what this means is that our freedoms have not been interrupted by dictators or wars. We're a very peaceful country. Our original constitutional document has a phrase that shows Canadian values: peace, order, and good government. And you notice there's capital letters on those words, which means they're very important ideas. These ideas and values have helped Canadian people build Canada and make it strong, even though it was tough. The land is so big and so unsettled, and the weather is so rough, and it was historically as well. It's very important to me that as we talk about who we are as Canadians, we first talk about Canada's first people, the Aboriginal people. I do have a small update for you. You'll notice that throughout your guide, you'll see the word Aboriginal. However, since 2016, Aboriginal people in Canada prefer the term Indigenous. I'm going to continue to use the word Aboriginal because it's what is in your guide. But I thought you would like to know about this update since you're going to be Canadian soon. Aboriginal people were the first people to live in Canada, and most believe they came many thousands of years ago from Asia. They worked and lived here long before European explorers came. There are many different groups of what we call First Nations, and they had and still have religious beliefs about their relationship with the Creator and nature. In 1763, King George III of England promised to allow Aboriginal people the right to their land, and this is called territorial rights. This was a basis for making agreements about land called treaties. Not all of Canada's history has been positive, especially with Aboriginal people. For example, treaties and promises made between the Europeans and the Aboriginal people have not always been respected, even though the promises to keep territorial rights are in the Canadian Constitution. Canada has a difficult history with Aboriginal people. From the 1800s to the 1980s, Aboriginal children were taken from their families by the Government of Canada to live in residential schools. The idea behind this was to make the children more like English and French Canadian children. The children were badly abused, physically and mentally. They weren't allowed to speak their language or practice their culture. Of course, it was so terrible that many children tried to run away. In 2008, the Government of Canada apologized formally to Aboriginal people who were sent to residential schools. Please check the links in this module for a link to a film called Indian Horse. It reflects this experience of residential school. It's a very sad film, but it's very well done. Now let's look at the photo on the bottom of page 10. This is Bill Reid, an artist from the Haida Nation, a unique First Nation that is found up along the Pacific Northwest coast of British Columbia. They are famous for their culture and language and the magnificent totem poles. This is a Haida totem pole. Now you need to know more about Aboriginal people because there are three main groups according to your guide. These three groups are Indian, Métis, and Inuit. First, we will talk about the group called Indian. This group refers to all Aboriginal people who are not Métis or Inuit. Now we will use the term First Nations when we talk about these groups of Aboriginal people who have many unique languages and cultures all across Canada. Today, about half of First Nations people live on lands the government owns called reserves. There are about 600 reserve communities. The other half live in Canada's cities. About 65% of Aboriginal people are from First Nations communities. The second group after First Nations are called the Métis. This group mostly live in the prairie provinces of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. They have a unique background of Aboriginal and European together. The word Métis means mixed blood. Now they may speak English or French, but they also have their own dialect called Michif. About 30% of Aboriginal people in Canada are Métis. The third group of Aboriginal people are called the Inuit. The word Inuit is from the Inuktitut language and it means the people. The Inuit live in small communities across the Arctic, and they are an amazing group who know a lot about the northern lands, animals, and the sea. They know how to live successfully in a very cold climate. Only 4% of Canada's Aboriginal people are Inuit. Okay, so now we need to talk about the other two founding people. The other two groups are the English and the French Christian people who came to Canada from Europe. Most Canadians speak English or French, and we call English speakers Anglophones, and French speakers are called Francophones. And I hope you'll remember that one of our rights as Canadian citizens is to have our government provide us services in English or French, because Canada's official languages are English and French. There are 18 million Anglophones in Canada and 7 million Francophones. Of course, most Francophones live in the province of Quebec, but 1 million Francophones live in Ontario, New Brunswick, and Manitoba. The next group we're going to talk about is the Acadians. They are descendants or family of the first French immigrants that came to Canada's east coast in the 1600s. In your guide, you see the word Maritimes. That is another name for Canada's east coast provinces. There were wars between the British and the French in Europe between 1755 and 1763. The French people living on the east coast were deported and forced to leave. This was known as the Great Upheaval. But many Acadian people were able to stay and kept their unique culture and language and are part of the culture of Atlantic Canada now. Now we need to talk about Quebecers, who are the people who live in the province of Quebec. Most people in Quebec speak French, but there are about 1 million who speak English. English Quebecers have family who originally came from England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales in the 1600s. The French people of Quebec are from the French, who came in the 1600s and 1700s. So you can see that Quebec has a unique situation in Canada, with the majority of people coming from French language and culture. It's important to know that Quebecers have been given a special status of a nation within a united Canada, and this status was given in 2006. Okay, so now when we talk about English Canada, we're pretty much talking about the rest of Canada, which was settled by people of English background and people from other Northern European countries. So if you look at me, Esther, and listen to me, you can probably guess that I am from an English background. And my family has been in Canada for over 200 years. Looking at the bottom of page 12, you're going to see the title, Diversity in Canada. So Canada is known as a land of immigrants because over the past 200 years, millions of immigrants have come to help build Canada. Many cultural and religious groups work together and live together peacefully to make Canada a great country, and we're very proud of that. Okay, let's talk about languages in Canada. We know that English and French are the official languages, but of course, many people speak other languages at home. After English, Chinese is the most popular language. In Vancouver, 13% of people speak Chinese at home and 7% in Toronto. Now, these numbers may have changed since 2012, but that's what's in your guide. Arabic and Punjabi are also widely spoken across Canada, as well as many other languages. On page 13, the guide talks about religions in Canada. Most Canadian people say they are Christian. Most of those are Catholic and then Protestant. Some religions that are growing in Canada are Muslim, Jews, Hindus, and Sikhs, and also people who say that they have no religion. Let's go back to the top of page 11 for 1 minute. There's a picture at the top I want you to notice. You see a man in traditional First Nations headdress with feathers. His name was John Buchan, and he was a Governor General from 1935 to 1940. He had an important message. He said, immigrant groups should retain their individuality and each make its contribution to the national character. He said that each could learn from the other, and while they cherish their own special loyalties and traditions, they cherish not less that new loyalty and tradition which springs from their union. He was saying how we can learn from each other while keeping our own traditions, and that does not make our new identity as Canadians who live and work together mean less. Loyalty to your own cultural traditions and Canada are both important and special. I really like this message, especially for you as new Canadian citizens. One last thing. I would like to draw your attention to the top of page 12, where it talks about becoming a Canadian citizen. This stresses the importance of obeying Canadian laws. It's referring to the fact that many people immigrate to Canada from countries where there is war and fighting between religious and cultural groups, and it's emphasizing that that is not tolerated under Canadian law. With all of that said, I hope you learned a lot about who Canada's people are in this lesson, and I'm very excited you're going to be joining us as a Canadian citizen soon. So that is the end of Module 2, Lesson 2, and see you in Module 3.